Hello, welcome to OBE. Do humans possess souls that live busy lives between earthly incarnations? Does our so-called higher self retain the experiences and lessons of each life lived on Earth? My guest today is hypnotherapist Scott DeTamble. Scott is here to share insights and experience from his 18 years of practice. We'll discuss the premise that our souls lead productive and interesting lives in higher realms. Scott was inspired in part by Dr. Michael Newton, and Scott continues on in those footsteps to this day. So without further ado, let's welcome Scott to the show. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing great. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You have a very interesting job, and before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? Did you have an experience that opened your eyes overnight, or was this something, your spiritual background, did it just kind of evolve over time, or how did that work?
Oh, that's an interesting question. No, I wouldn't say that I had a particular experience like you, watching TV and flying over the city. That would have been cool. I mean, it was just sort of an inner knowing, a sense of, I guess, just some reality beyond what I could see with my, eyes and feel with my hands, and that I always had a sense of that. I really loved history, and there were certain eras and certain cultures that I was really drawn to. So I didn't have any one particular lightning strike, but it was just always sort of an inner knowing that there's much more beyond what we see.
When you got older, was it in the 90s when you saw the book by Dr. Michael Newton? Is that right?
Yeah, it came out in 94, Journey of Souls. And I think I saw it around 95. I was in a library. I was studying astrology at that time. And so in that section of the library, I remember the number, the Dewey number. It's 133.5. That's the astrology. And around there, and the 133s and stuff, is all these mystical books, right? So yeah, I seen this book, Journey of Souls. I picked it up. I was like, wow. I'd read a lot of books since the mid to late 70s and 80s about past lives and that kind of thing. But this Journey of Souls was kind of a step beyond, because he took people into a past life, and then through the death, and then up into spirit, and then, okay, what's going on there? Most of these other books didn't really talk about that. They just talked about the other lifetimes. But yeah, this one talked about, wow, there's this whole thing going on up there, different dimensions and different activities, and spirit guides and soulmates and places of healing and places of learning and all this stuff. It was very cool. Definitely made an impression on me. But I hadn't been doing hypnotherapy yet, so I kind of put that aside. But later, around 2000, I decided I really want to learn about this past life stuff, and the way to do that is through hypnosis. So I took hypnosis training with a lady in Anaheim, California, Dr. Jean, who since moved on to other worlds. But so that opened me up. And then I took a training with a gentleman named Dick Sutphin, whose book I had read in the 70s. Very cool book. It was called You Were Born Again to Be Together. It was about lovers who tend to incarnate over and over again in these different lifetimes. And that book had made a big impression on me. So it was very cool. I got to go to a training with that guy, whose book I really loved. I got to meet him and stuff and learn his techniques. And I just loved his techniques. And then, so I did that for a few years. And then on some early, the internet was still pretty young in the 90s and around millennium. But I was on some network and they said, Michael Newton's going to be training in Life Between Lives. I was like, well, that's interesting. I remembered that book. And it happened to be in LA, where I live in Southern California. They move it around every year. But yeah, so it happened to be really convenient, almost like it was a setup for me. So I did that. That was very life-changing. That training was like a...
Now, had you started your hypnotherapy training at that point, or?
Yeah, I had been a hypnotherapist for about 3 years at that point, mostly focusing on past life regression, but also other hypnotherapy stuff, just helping people with phobias and emotions and whatever. But yeah, so I had a little bit of a jump on that, but that just blew things wide open.
I can imagine, yeah. So you got to meet Dr. Newton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt kind of like a fish out of water at that training. There was a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'm just sort of this new agey hippie guy or whatever. But yeah, it was really cool, and it was really intense. We had like a partner, like a training partner. They assigned someone or whatever. So we got to practice on each other. So that was my first session that I guided, and then also the first session that I received. So, when I was driving home from that training, and I was looking on the freeway and looking at all the people, and a thought came to me like, wow, everyone here, everyone I see has this incredible tapestry of a soul history. And now I have the tools to help them take a look at that. That was a mind-blowing moment.
Yeah, I can relate, because that's kind of how I look at people. When I meet people, I try to get a feel for where they are in that tapestry, where they came from in their last life, where they might be going for the next one, how they're doing. And I kind of sum up their soul in a way.
Wow, that's interesting. That's very cool if you can get a feel for that, where someone is.
Yes, I'll get an image in my head too of like their aura. I don't see it with my eyes, but I just have a mental picture from what I'm feeling.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So you're pretty intuitive.
At this point, yes, because I've been doing this a while, and I was wondering if I could ask you about a couple of things that I've experienced, and I'm wondering if maybe you've had any of your clients mention these things to you.
I'd love to hear it. I'll love to share.
Time travel in the spirit world. Has anyone told you that they've gone backward or forward in time to maybe visit another life or view it or that kind of thing?
Absolutely. It's funny. Yesterday, I was laying out by the pool and I was listening to a recording of a past life regression thing by that same guy, Dick Sutphin. I love that guy. And he's like, okay, what year is it? I was like 2586. I'm like, what the heck? So I think I was looking at a future life. But yes, sir, absolutely. Many of my clients have, even though we're planning to look at a past life, they flip into some future life in the year 2500 or 3000 or something, or even out of time, or where time is different, or time doesn't exist the same way it does in the earth or the physical world. So yeah, I would say your experience is very interesting and fascinating, and I've seen a lot of people have those experiences. I would just say about time, in the spirit world, it appears that time, it doesn't exist the same way it does for us. because we have these human brains, we have these sequential events, or the movement of the heavens is kind of how we count time, right? The sun, the year, the earth move around the sun, or all that, the day, the night. In the spiritual dimensions, and there are many dimensions, apparently, time is different or just doesn't exist. Or in a sense, all lifetimes are simultaneous in some way that we can't really understand. Have you ever read the Seth books by Jane Roberts, or are you familiar with that?
Gosh, I read the first one. Oh my God, was it been 20 years maybe since those came out?
Yeah, she was channeling in the 60s and 70s, maybe 80s. She was really ahead of the game. But yeah, so this spirit teacher, Seth, would talk through this woman, Jane Roberts, in upstate New York. And Seth talks about, all existence is simultaneous. All your lifetimes are simultaneous. And so, the same teacher I mentioned, Dick Sutphin, he had a really cool illustration. Remember on Star Trek, the classic Star Trek, they had that 3D chess thing where Spock would play with Kirk. They had like 3 or 4 or 6 levels of chess.
Can you see behind me? I got the Star Trek poster on the wall. I'm a big Trekkie.
Oh, yeah, you do. That's great.
Yeah, the 3D chess.
Yeah. So if you had a glass chessboard, and say you have 100 of them just stacked up, and then on this chessboard you're a pawn. This is a life where you're a pawn. This one you're a king. This one you're a knight. And then on each board the piece is moving around. But if you look down through the top and see that whole pageant of, it's just this whole thing moving around, that's our real existence. So it's easy, this is a funny time thing, it's easy to think that a decision you make in this life or an event could influence a future life, right? Well, that seems easy but it can also influence your past lives. So that's a little mind-boggling. I don't really understand it, but yeah, absolutely. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experience with time travel.
Well, sure. I mentioned the time travel because one experience I talk about in interviews is, my thing is, I do the superhero thing to this day. And so I go to bed, I'm out, I get the alarm signals waiting for me. It's very dire. So I follow it, I shoot off. I look like Superman with the cape and I'm a ghost. So I shoot off I'm high over England, like way up in the sky. I look down, I can see England, the island of England, the British Isles, and the alarm's coming from the southern coast. So I shoot down and I get close to the coastline. I see an old sailing vessel. There's no sign of today's technology or any of that thing. I see this old sailing ship, like a 17th or 18th century sailing ship, docked at the shore. And now I'm hovering off the side of this ship, and there's a ruckus on the deck, and there's a man in a tunic with a woman, and the man is fighting off these pirates, and the man is cut up real bad, and he's not going to make it, and he's the source of the alarm. And this particular alarm was stronger than the others I had received previously. So as I'm watching, I'm about to get involved and incapacitate these pirates to save this man in the tunic. But in the next moment, he is stabbed through the stomach, and I watch as he lifts out of his body, and he goes up and away to the tunnel and the light in the sky, and he's gone. And then in the next moment, I am pulled into his body. I couldn't do anything about it. I'm just sucked right in there. And I have this, sort of mind meld thing where I'm remembering how to fight with a sword, and I'm remembering all these things that I can do, or this person can do. And I can feel all the cuts and stabs, and, it feels like hot, but it's not overwhelming. And so I'm able to muster enough energy to fight off these pirates and defeat them. And I grab the woman, and we run down the plank to the shoreline, and we're going up this path along the shore there. And I turn around to make sure there's no pursuit, which there isn't. And I realize the woman is going to make it to the village safely, and my job is done. So I lift out of this guy's body, and I actually start my latest novel, Ram I Am, with, I put some of my experiences in my novels. So I describe it as I lift out of this guy's body, and his body hits the dirt like a stampeded monkey. I mean, he's, And then I have this nice, leisurely, beautiful flight over the ocean on the way home as a way to mitigate the violence that just occurred. I came to find out later that was a past version of me that I heard calling for help. And later in Robert Monroe's books, he was talking about at night he'd get up and some vicious creature jumped on his back, and he was freaking out so bad and crying and sobbing, and he'd get it off of him and get back in his body. And after several nights of this, it was very traumatic for him. After several nights of this, he gets out of his body. The creature is there. It gets on him. He's crying. He's praying for help. And some angelic kind of being comes into the room, just this really bright, glowing soul. And it comes up to Robert and reaches behind him, and it lifts off a cat, his cat, that had passed away and sleeps on the bed with his daddy and mommy. And when he saw daddy get out of his body, the cat, jumped on him like it used to on his shoulder. So then years later, Robert Monroe goes out of body, and he gets this sort of alarm call, and he goes back, and it's him from 20 years ago with the cat on his shoulder, and he's crying and sobbing and praying for someone to come help him.
Wow.
Yeah, he went to help himself. So that was pretty cool. Like, Robert Monroe's books for me were very validating in a lot of ways. So yeah, the time travel thing I think is very cool. You can visit past lives. And
I mean, how many times have we wished that we could go back and tell ourselves, don't turn left, turn right, or whatever.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Dude, you're making the wrong decision. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, Jonathan, when you had that experience about the pirate and that, were you asleep or were you awake here and now?
I was in my trance, mind awake, body asleep, my heart's beating a couple times a minute, that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm in my trance.
Well, what does that mean, your trance?
It's like my first experience when I was a boy, and I thought this creature was coming to kill me, so I said, be dead. Don't play dead, just, you have to be dead. So I really make myself dead. And that be dead mantra, that became my mantra. I put myself in that near-death space where I'm barely alive. There's enough energy to keep my brain and the heart beating a couple of times a minute, but the rest of me is kind of out and doing stuff. So that brings up another thing. If I'm ever out your way, I'd love to have a session with you to find out more about the man in the tunic on that pirate ship, because I have this feeling he came from China where he trained in the mystical arts with, I mean, it's this whole thing, this journey that led up to that. And it's very fuzzy, but I think it would be cool if I could sit down with you and maybe relive some of that.
Like flesh it out and see, what was that all about? Look back and forth. Yeah, I would love to do that. And by the way, I do like Zoom or distant sessions, so you don't have to come to California. So yeah, I do sessions with people all over the world, UK and Europe and South America and all over. So yeah, that's an option. But yeah, it'd be really fun to flesh that out and go. And then like when you're in that life, okay, so there's this battle. I mean, looking at all the life would be cool. Then there's this battle with the pirates, and then what happens? What do you perceive? What happens to you? Do you just bail off, or are you still sort of there? Are you watching when he fights off the pirates and saves the girl and all that kind of stuff? That would be interesting to understand.